Sean O'Keefe. And he's going to go over a topic that's of interest to me and many of you out here, and that's the role of the emerging global aerospace industry. I found out, reading the resume, that Sean is currently the CEO of the European Aeronautic, Defense, and Space Company. So I spent most of my time, the last half hour, trying to work out an apology for the fact that I was born and raised in Seattle and went through school on a Boeing Company scholarship. But I think I can make up for that. The last 3 years before I retired, I worked for BAE Systems, and we were a partner of yours. Prior to this role, Sean, I won't go through the whole resume, but several things that drew my attention. Up until 2005, he was the 10th administrator of the National Aeronautics and Space Administration. In 1992, he was Secretary of the Navy, which makes him a good guy in my book. And I think the thing he's most proud of is that in both 2003 and 2004, he was elected by the Irish American magazine to be one of the top 100 Irish Americans of all time. Now that's an accomplishment for a southern boy with a Norwegian name like O'Keefe to be elected one of the top 100 Irish Americans. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Sean O'Keefe.
Thank you all very much. I guess I'm setting a new standard for the definition of the term just-in-time inventory. I apologize for coming right on the heels of the end of the dinner here, but I'm delighted to have a chance to be with you all, and I appreciate the invitation. It's very thoughtful. Thank you for the chance to be part of a community that, frankly, Lauren and I should be more appreciative, have been part of here on and off over the last decade. And we moved out here in 2001 when I had come back to Washington, D.C. after about my third stint in public service. And found this to be a most hospitable community. Left for a brief time after I left NASA to go be the chancellor at Louisiana State University, and that was lots of fun, and the food was great. It was a wonderful area because my family is from New Orleans originally. But when we concluded that activity just a couple of years ago, this was a chance to come back to Loudoun County, in a place that we really have come to call home. And she's from Connecticut, I'm from Louisiana, but we're from Virginia. Okay? It's really it is a kind of I'm hardly the poster boy for discussion of the progress of aerospace in the United States, given how I look like. Given the experiences I've been through of late, you sit back and say, yeah, well, you know, this guy looks like he's been in a plane crash. Yeah, well, I have. That's no doubt about it. But it's a consequence, I think, more of a passion for wanting to explore and subject my son to the opportunity to do so in a great state, a great place, an extraordinary location in our country called Alaska that brought us to that occasion. And it was a fateful event in August of last year, but nonetheless we survived and came out of it, I'd like to think, in the long run, maybe a whole lot stronger. And certainly a lot more philosophical as a result of the experience. But the real most courageous member of our family in dealing with all the challenges that went with that certainly was Laura, who really had to work through a lot of the issues that came from that, but one that nonetheless I think made us a whole lot stronger family, and as a result we lived to tell about the experience, and that was quite something else. To the aerospace industry overall, though, let me suggest that we're on the cusp right now, I think, of a real renaissance in aerospace as a dominant industry in the United States, and indeed globally. I mean, there's a couple of statistics just as backdrop, just to give you a feel for this, and I'll make this brief, and then we can open it up to more conversation, because I know, having previously served in a couple of occasions in my life in various Rotary groups, there is a hard stop that occurs here. I got that. That's been drilled into me, and I appreciate that very prompt kind of consideration. So I'll make this brief, put it in context, and then I'll have more for conversation. In the United States, every year, we export about $80 billion worth of aerospace product outside the United States. That's how dominant, how major an industry aerospace is in the United States. Now, at the same time, we import in $25 billion. So we are therefore definitionally a global industry. The folks who underwrote your scholarship build about 60% of their aircraft in the United States of America. The rest of it is from somewhere else overseas. The folks that build aircraft that is a subdivision of the company I work for, also known as Airbus, builds about 60% of their product, and 40% of it comes from the United States. So as a consequence, we are a major global industry around the world. And it's one that, these are the two dominant players in the mid-body and wide-body aircraft. And almost every one of us, I'll bet everybody in this room, has flown on one or the other, if not both, varieties of aircraft that both these companies produce. They're ubiquitous. They're all over the world. EADS purchases about $11 billion worth of aerospace product for production of helicopters, aircraft, you name it, radars, all kinds of things that we build in the United States every single year. That represents about 15% of all the aerospace product that the United States of America every year produces globally. Is one company. So again, there is no national limitations anymore. Globalization is not a concept, it's here today, right now. And in this industry, it exists dominantly in this particular industry immediately. And it's an opportunity that really is an extraordinary kind of global catalyst or engine for economic development. That is not just because the United States or any other nation, Europeans or anybody else, believe is something they're dominant in. Every emerging industrial economy in the world uses aerospace industry or some other dominant kind of industry like it, IT, medical equipment, those are the big ones, as a means to really catapult the economic activity of those nations into a different standing. In my prior incarnation at NASA, lots of hand-wringing that went on among the hallowed halls of the Congress over the emergence of the Chinese in the aerospace industry. This was something that they must have some sinister view of trying to reach space for the purpose that, just like the Russians did with Sputnik, okay? This idea of something about the size of a VCR flying around would be a danger to us in the 1950s, propelled an entire nation to think in terms of this industry as something we needed to get ahead of and be dominant in. And so therefore it was natural that many folks who are obsessed with this kind of global kind of competition must think there must be some sinister activity on the part of the Chinese for wanting to get into the aerospace industry, develop their own capability to produce engines, propulsion systems, capability to go anywhere you want to go, to include spacecraft. And it must be sinister because they have something in mind. No, they're following the same pattern we did, the Russians did, the Brazilians are now, the Canadians have, which is to use this industry as a means to catapult and be a catalyst for economic development in a way that many other industries only peripherally can do. It covers a wide range of things. If you think about it, it's part of the reason why this country has become such an extraordinary industrial capacity, a technology leader, and in so many ways dominant on the world stage in so many elements of what are national defense as well as aerospace kinds of advances. To do things as remarkable as what I witnessed of sending a piece of machinery the size of a golf cart 65 million miles away, landing it at a location that was within 1 square mile of where it was supposed to be, and then operated for what we thought was going to be the better end of 3 months, that now today, 6 years later, is still operating on its own, known as the Mars exploration rovers. It's the same idea. It's the reason we went to the moon back at a time when the entire capability that you see in lots of grainy footage, and certainly in Hollywood depiction of a lot of very skinny guys walking around wearing white shirts and skinny ties, horn-rimmed glasses, smoking Camel cigarettes one after another, wearing pocket protectors, okay, had in those locations for Apollo mission control all the computing capacity of what you find today on an iPad. That's it. By brute force, we did some things that used the technology of the time and elevated it to its higher standing rapidly, to the point where we're moving entire industries in a way that the pace of change we can't keep up with. Think about how many laptops, how many iPads get put as doorstops every year because the next model came out that's so much better. That's the whole technology revolution has been motivated by our human desire to explore, to understand, and it's all part of this aerospace fascination that's dominated the way we look at things. So, where we are, I think, at this particular juncture in time, is the next elevation, the next movement in that, seeing how broadly, again, other nations, just like we've seen as a pattern throughout the course of modern history, using this particular industry as a means to explore material sciences, to reduce weight, which is then a direct relationship to how much mass you can move to destinations, and that mass is defined as us, sitting in commercial aircraft, or astronauts flying to other locations. All of that means the more you reduce it, the more you provide the capability and the propulsion means to get there, the faster you're going to go, the sooner you'll get there, and the longer you can stay. It's all the same equation that goes into every piece of math that develops why the commercial aerospace industry works, why airlines work, why all this has become something we consider everyday activity. Looking around the room, we're all roughly about the age in which we can remember, if not ourselves, certainly the generation before us, that viewed commercial airline travel as something of a novelty. I can recall my aunts who were aghast when I didn't get aboard an airplane wearing a coat and tie. When was the last time you saw anybody really wearing a coat and tie, anything on the business section? Okay? Mostly it's kids in backpacks and everything else coming back from a weekend at college. It's become that easy, that frequent, that simple for all of us to do. Something that was just unknown to the generation before us, or unimaginable as something that could be possible. So today, again, the opportunity to really be part of seeing this globalization that's occurred, and it's right upon us, is really quite extraordinary, and one that we're going to continue to see that level of activity. And part of it is driven by the technology and the fascination of exploration and all the things I talked about. But it's also about just basic fundamental competition. There's no doubt about it. Every single day, same guys who had the great good sense to underwrite your scholarship are the ones we are in mortal competitive combat with every day for commercial activity. And some days we win, and some days we don't. And that's part of what the activity is all about, that always makes everything we do that much more advanced, that motivates us to want to find different ways to do things smarter than they did, and they smarter than we did. That's part of the whole notion of this. The next big chapter that I think is coming, and I'll end with this, is an effort that, as of today, as a matter of fact, the United States government had asked for solicitations for production of what is really fundamentally a commercial off-the-shelf aircraft that both we can do, Boeing can do, all of us, that are modified for the purpose of being refueling capabilities. You take the seats out, you put a lot of fuel in there, and you provide the means to refuel aircraft at great distances and at great speed. That's it. That's the fundamental thing. We've been doing it for 50 years. Boeing's done it for a long time. We've done it for a long while. That's all of it's capable. But they're asking now for 180 of these things. Well, just a month ago, the largest single commercial contract ever let to any aerospace firm by any airline for 180 aircraft was awarded to Airbus. Just a month ago. This contract that's now, as of today, they're requested final offers for both of us, will now be evaluated, and over the next couple of weeks we'll probably get an answer to that, and it eclipses the amount of that historic contract a month ago by a factor of 3. This is going to be a big deal. And when we win, this will constitute the second company in the United States of America who's capable of building mid-body, wide-body aircraft in another part of the United States. The only nation on earth that produces all of it. And when we do so, I promise, there is absolutely no intention whatsoever to buy Boeing. Okay? There will be 2 companies in this country that can do that. And when you look at all the advances that have occurred over the course of time and all the developments that have happened in the aerospace industry, always what occurs whenever there are major efforts like these is it propels economic activity like which we only could dimly appreciate at the time. And that's not to say that that couldn't also be possible if it's awarded to our competitors, our colleagues, folks who are also intrepid explorers in this industry. If they win, then more power to them. We did our best, and that's the way it's going to go. But it nonetheless is going to have a tremendous advantage for all of us in seeing a completely different way that we continue to look at a catalyst for this purpose, for economic development. But the reason it's interesting for me, I think in addition to for all of us who are involved in EADS North America, is should it come our way, we're a prime contractor. Our headquarters are currently in Roslyn. We're moving with our colleagues in all the elements of EADS, which is Airbus and Eurocopter and Astrium and a number of other companies. They're all part of this conglomerate to right here in Loudoun County. Right off 28, we're going to be headquartered right there. And whether or not this is a win or not, that's where we're going to be. This is something we're here to stay. It's a part of the country we want to be in. We'll manage a continuing activity both nationally and indeed through all of our colleagues in the company globally, because that's the nature of the industry we're in. We're awfully proud to be part of this community and right here engaged in those activities to be successful at them, because this atmosphere provides us the ability to do so. So I thank you again for the opportunity to be with you. It's a great treat to come back from the wilds of Washington, D.C. to civilization and to spend a little time with you. And I appreciate your indulgence, and thank you for letting me spend the evening. Appreciate it.
Are there any questions for Sean?
Sure.
Is it a problem that we, as a country, have just a couple shuttle missions left, and we canceled out the, I think it's the Constellation program, and we're now relying on the Russians to do our heavy lifting up to the space station? Is that a big problem? And if so, what's down the road to solve that problem?
I'll tell you flat out, right up front. I've made it a point in every professional capacity that I've been in that I do not comment on what my successors do anywhere. And the basic view is, geez, I really hate the last guy coming in and telling me how to suck eggs, you know. And so I'm not going to do that to anybody. These are tough jobs. So what I'll do instead is relay to you some facts, and you can reach your own conclusion that can answer the question you posed. At the end of this summer, we will have concluded the U.S. ability to reach low Earth orbit and beyond, individually, as a country, as a nation. We no longer will have a capacity. It will be retired. The administration has determined that this is a capability that is outdated and no longer necessary for these purposes. There is as you said, cited, in fact, a $100 billion investment that is flying above us, comes over every 90 minutes, $100 billion that we put money into, the Russians, the Canadians, the Europeans, and the Japanese, all in concert, 16 nations all playing in this game, to build the most extraordinary international laboratory that's in space, flying at 300 miles above the Earth's surface, and comes over us every 90 minutes, that will only be accessible by the Russian Soyuz spacecraft. Fact is, the Russian Soyuz spacecraft is roughly the size, a little smaller actually, than an Apollo capsule. Seats 3 people, get them there within a short time. The capability to carry cargo is going to be extremely limited. For a capability that's the size of 2 football fields, laboratory, in which you can only do perfectly tuned microgravity research, will be limited to an equally sized Apollo capsule in which you will shove groceries and expendables and all those other things into as often as you could possibly live one home. And if you want to go, then you better send everybody you have and everything you need to send to a really garden spot on the Earth called Baikonur, out in the middle of Kazakhstan, to which you have to fly a long time from Moscow to get to. I've been there a few times. It's a place that I have no wild desire to want to go back to anytime soon. But that's where we'll have to go. And the Russians are extraordinary people. Let me tell you, I spent part of my life, a good portion of my professional career, during the waning days of the Cold War, really worrying about the capability of another superpower on this planet obliterating us, and how do we work that out? My time as Secretary of the Navy was at the really closing chapters of that period. And it was really something that was palpable. I mean, folks really worried about it. Almost as much as we did during the Sputnik era over the idea that we would become subjected to that kind of global conflict. We've come to know them as people now. They're no longer adversaries. They are incredibly industrious people. They're unbelievably ingenious in terms of doing things with a lot less than what we do. My counterpart from when I was at NASA at the time told me not more than a few months ago when I saw him for the first time since I left NASA. When I congratulated him on the fact that this was going to become the unilateral only source, only means to accomplish the capability from where they are, launching folks from Baikonur, and capabilities from Baikonur to low Earth orbit on the International Space Station. I fully expected, given the heritage of the Russian people, who are, it's a very proud heritage, that he would say, yes, of course. We've always stepped up to those challenges, and they have, every time. Every time we needed a partner, they were the best partners we had. They were the ones that dug down deepest, worked hardest, stayed latest, and made it work somehow. And I fully expected he'd give me a lecture about that, a homily about that. And instead, quite the contrary, he said, what worries me is the absence of redundancy. It scares me to death. We are one problem away from having no access at all for people on this planet to do the things that humans have always wanted to do, which is explore. And we've already made this extraordinary investment, and it's now going to be up there, and we may not be able to access it. That's a shame. That's something we really ought to think about, we ought to wonder about. And there is no program that follows. And hopefully once that dawning realization occurs, the fact is there will be some opinion expressed, not mine, that will view this as whether or not that's really a good idea or not. And we'll see what the answer is. But it'll take us a while. And unfortunately, as of this summer, it's over.
But may I ask you part B?
I'll make it shorter, I'm sorry.
What are the facts behind why the shuttle can't fly anymore, or won't be flown?
Well, it's expensive. I mean, there's just no getting around it. I mean, it's a very expensive piece of machinery, always has been. It was designed in the hopes of trying to get, 1970s when it was put together as a design and developed for that. With the hopes were that this would fly regularly, I mean, like 50 missions a year. Well, shoot, it never got over about 8 at the most. It's really ghastly expensive. And so as a consequence, the idea that it would eventually become the means to launch, commercial satellites and all this stuff, no, HBO satellites, whatever. You're better off putting them on a medium-sized lift vehicle and sending them up there as an expendable whole lot. It's a lot cheaper. Second thing is it has an enormous number of moving parts. I mean, this is designed to be an aircraft that is in a capability that launches like a rocket, gets into low Earth orbit, maneuvers like, a spacecraft with all kinds of internal capabilities. It turns out to have a propulsion capability that's no more than about 1 degree of separation from where it goes, so basic orbital mechanics still govern. And it's got, was designed to be a capability like a glider coming back to Earth on its own volition, own means, expendable vehicle, or I'm sorry, a reusable launch vehicle that would come back in, and it has all the, quite honestly, all of the aerodynamic characteristics of a safe falling to the Earth with the door open. Okay, I mean, it's just, that's unbelievable. It's a big piece of machinery, it's really exotic, it's unbelievable, it's an astounding achievement. It's an amazing piece of technology that's past its time, no doubt about it. So the issue of whether it should be retired in some period was not in question. I mean, the Challenger disaster in '86, the Columbia tragedy on reentry that I was there for during that time, on reentry that couldn't withstand that capability. Those were just pointed to the limitations of this craft. And it's hard, it really is. It's how hard it is. This stuff is not easy. It was never intended to be something that would become so simple that everybody's, oh, well, popping off another one this week. No, this is, every one of them is an event. And everybody sweats over it, and it's unbelievable. A lot of things that can go wrong, and a number of moving parts that can destabilize it. But the idea was to then start a replacement effort. Okay, let's go with the next generation. That's what we've always done. This was, Gemini or Mercury, Gemini, Apollo, shuttle. Okay, what's next? What's the next capability that gets us off this rock and capable of exploring anywhere you want? If not in this solar system, certainly within the range. And that's what has been terminated. In addition to saying, let's go ahead and retire this. So I don't necessarily quibble over the argument of whether this needs to stop. I mean, in fullness of time, it does. It's time to really go to the next generation. But the fact that there is no successor, there's no plan to even look at this, aside from saying, well, someday we'll get there. That's really it.
George, I can hold the questions, you'll be here a few minutes after, right? So everybody can come up and ask questions.
Okay.
So we really, really want to thank you for talk like that, but we want to give you something too. First of all, you need some luck. So we always give you a coin. It's a rotary coin. And I think our race chairman must want you to come to a race and everything, because he's giving me a race.
Oh, I'm going to look great in a race.
Well, you just stand there with the lucky coin out. Thank you, though, very, very much.
Appreciate it.